Chapter 5. Flora's was the first brain to re-engage, although she sounded a little strained. "I think I need another beer. Why don't you get them while I let the dogs out?" "Coward," she bristled. "I didn't say I wouldn't answer you. I'm just thinking about it, picturing it in my mind's eye. I'm not sure it even left an impression." Evan gave a disbelieving grin and lunged at Flora as she hopped off the sofa. A trail of dogs followed her out, guarding their mistress's virtue, but not for much longer if he had a say in the matter. Relaxing back, he made use of Flora's absence and stretched himself full length across the seat. His eyes were still a bit sore and the overhead light was making them sting. He put a cushion over his forehead and savoured the beauty of just chilling out. Evan didn't hear Flora come back in, hypnotised by the beer, the warm room and the lack of sleep lately. He wasn't aware of her presence as she stood over him, thinking about the answer to his question. Flora didn't know what to do. She usually just made a choice and stuck with it, right or wrong. All that was clear now was her loneliness, and in front of her was a gorgeous man, sexy and fun, and not stuck up his own arse. She itched to touch him and have him touch her. With his all-too-knowing eyes safely covered, Flora's attention fell to his strong, square jaw and finely chiselled lips. They were plush and well-formed, the lines of his Cupid's bow like two defined peaks, so perfectly etched. At each corner of his mouth the creases formed a tilt, meaning that even in repose he looked amused. Delicate arcs were worn into the skin framing his mouth, emphasising its beauty. Evan made a slight snoring sound and smiled in his sleep, revealing strong white teeth that flared towards the ends. They weren't the teeth of a man roaming the street. If he were sleeping rough, he'd not been doing it for long. Flora was weighing the risks of admitting defeat. Evan's sturdy body overflowed the settee, all 6 feet something of him, and she was sure the rest would match the part she'd already admired. Sneakily, she lifted the tail of his loose plaid shirt and leaned over for a better look. Unfortunately, Fillmore decided at the same moment that he should investigate too, and stuck his cold, wet nose on Evan's abs, jerking him awake. "Aha! What mischief are you looking for there, young Flora?" Laughing at being caught out, she stumbled backwards and sat on the coffee table. "I was looking for the beer you were supposed to get me, and I found a whole 6-pack instead. Yay me!" She gave the air a cheeky fist pump. Evan sat up and swung his legs off the sofa, putting them almost knee to knee, and his head only slightly lower than hers. They were perilously close. If she leaned in 4 inches, she could kiss him, and he seemed to reach the exact same conclusion. Flora's eyes widened, something that happened whenever she got nervous. Evan found himself wanting to sink into them. They were so dark and velvety. His head tilted, but then she blinked and broke the spell. "Forget the beer. I get stupid when I drink beer. We should eat something instead. Let me make you beans on toast." Evan's face dropped in horror. "No beans, Flora, definitely no. There would be no shag happening in the aftermath." Flora smiled raggedly, but the flush on her cheek told him she was interested. Still, she attempted to keep the mood at simple teasing. "Keep dreaming, big boy. And I don't do gourmet options, so what do you fancy?" He gave her a look that meant he was looking at what he fancied, and she had to laugh. "Now, for your enlightenment, that right there, what you just did, that was a brow waggle. Much, much better." "And is it working for you, sweetheart?" he growled suggestively. "Maybe," she giggled. "I'll tell you later. Right now, I'd rather have fish fingers and chips." 30 minutes later, they were eating at the kitchen table, the atmosphere strangely homey. If Evan looked down and to his right, Fillmore sat at attention, willing him to drop something. Across from him and snuggled on a hammock bed, the 3 shy puppy farm dogs watched with dark, intelligent eyes. I feel guilty eating my dinner in front of this audience. Ignore them, they are very well fed. The dog food probably costs more than ours, if that's any consolation. Not as much fun, though. I haven't had fish fingers since I was at uni. Evan joyfully dipped a steak cut chip in the obscene amount of ketchup on his plate. Flora watched him, gaining pleasure from his enjoyment. Your accent is all over the place. Were you born in Scotland? Yes, although some localities might argue I was born in Coldstream, which is barely over the border. I did my degree in Edinburgh, and I think my voice adapted to other regions. I've got pals from as far north as the Shetlands, so sometimes I drift into a much thicker accent. But I've been down south so long now, I guess it's faded, and sometimes the odd word can sound quite English. Evan seemed to realise he might have given away more than he should. It was dangerous to leave himself open to questions about being down south. He attempted a diversion. Women seem to bring out the accent. I think they like a bit of Scots. He gave her another go of his brow waggle, which was improving all the time. That's because it's nice, like having someone tickle your eardrum with their tongue. Flora gasped and clapped her hand over her mouth. Beer! I shouldn't have had any beer. It makes slutty things pop out of my mouth. Evan stifled a smile, relishing the breach in her defences. He continued to watch while he finished cramming food into his mouth. Flora, unnerved, picked at her remaining fish finger before cutting it into 7 tiny morsels. Using it as an excuse to break the spell, she stood up and gave each of the dogs a piece in turn. Not sure how to stall for longer, she turned back to him with eyes averted. Evan, sensing her need to regroup, offered her a little space. You cooked, so I'll wash up and let the dogs out. Why don't you go and grab a seat? He enjoyed the sight of Flora's high, round bottom scurrying away, negotiating the baby gate like a professional. As he ran the tap for the hot water, he swore to himself that was the last time she was running away from him that night. Evan heard the TV come on in the background, followed by the ping that told him she was using her laptop. He'd never seen a computer with rust before, and if he could, he would have jumped on the internet and bought her a new one. He let the dogs out, drying and rubbing their tummies when they came in, just as Flora had taught him. The snow was finally dissipating, and Evan wondered how much longer he could stay. In another few days it might become spring, and the weather would no longer be a bargaining chip. Feeling a bit glum at the thought of leaving, he strode over the baby gate and peeked at Flora from the hallway. She'd been upstairs and changed because now she wore pyjamas and a bathrobe and was intently scrutinising something on screen. She beamed up at him, and her freshly washed face looked as soft as marshmallows. Good news! Siobhan had an inquiry about the pictures I posted of Herbie. An older couple might like to have him. I'm going to call back and do a home visit. Evan returned to the sofa. Is it okay to let him go to old people? I didn't say they were old, Evan. I said older. It's perfect because Herbie's about 8, I reckon, and not many people want an older dog. But even if you're old, if you still want the companionship of a dog, then it's a smart idea to have an ageing or elderly one. You might just need people for backup. Somebody who'll have the dog if you're poorly, a neighbour who'll walk him for you, that kind of thing. I suppose, but do you think they'll be able to walk him? Evan was surprised how much he cared about the answer. He'd grown quite fond of the little white leg shagger. Evan, Flora threw her hands up, they're probably only in their late 50s, and I won't let them have him if it's not right. They're both retired and want a dog to keep them motivated, give them a reason to get up in the morning. That idea immediately distracted Evan, and he raised a dangerously knowing eyebrow. Personally, I would need you for that, sweetheart. You'd give me a reason to be up in the morning. Very up, in fact. Flora blushed a charming shade of raspberry. She tried to ignore his innuendo, and her addiction to the job almost accomplished that. The excitement of matching dogs with owners gave her a real sense of purpose, and Evan envied her surety. What did he have? A few mildly well-received books he'd had little joy in writing, a decent bank balance that he couldn't currently access, and a half-arsed idea to write romantic fiction. What kind of sense did that make? She started tapping away on her laptop, presumably responding to Siobhan. Her fringe was jammed behind her headband and stuck up in carelessly punky spikes. She screwed up her eyes in concentration, drawing attention to a tiny brown mole sat high on her right cheekbone. Flora's eyebrows, a shade darker than her russet brown hair, were almost startling against her ivory skin. She felt his stare on her and looked up, giving him a quick flash of dimples. "What are you staring at?" "You." Flora's eyes fluttered shyly, and he gave her a slow, sexy smile, utilizing every one of his shiny white teeth. It was both predatory and enticing. In a deep voice full of sexual undercurrents, he murmured, "I'll be back in just 1 minute." Evan went upstairs and fished in the pockets of his bag. The first one he tried held the blank notebooks he'd yet to start filling. He rummaged in another and came across what he wanted, a parting gift from Ella, his preferred brand of condoms. Evan opened the packaging and stashed a couple in his back pocket, feeling confident of seduction. By the time he returned to the front room, Flora had turned the computer off and lowered the volume on the television. Evan sat next to her, deliberately close, and turned his body into her. His steady fingers plucked the hairband from Flora's head and placed it on the table. "I like it when I can see all of your face, but the headband is not a good look." He stroked her fringe, smoothing the strands gently until they fell back into their proper place. "I'd think about growing this out. You shouldn't be hiding behind these curtains." Flora looked at him with questions in her dark eyes. Evan responded by dipping his head and kissing the mole on her cheek. It was the softest whisper of his lips, almost brushing her eyelashes, as he lifted his head to gauge her response. Evan didn't get a chance to see if he was out of line because Flora pressed her lush lips soundly to his, taking him completely by surprise. The unexpected momentum pushed him onto his back, with Flora sprawled out on top. He was right. She was gorgeous to cuddle, all squishy and warm in her thick, toweling robe. He felt the thick folds part and her silky pyjama-clad legs straddled his thighs, making every single body part Evan owned wake up in a hurry. "Flora," he sighed. Evan leaned up and captured her bottom lip, sucking softly before sliding his tongue deep into her mouth. She pressed back against him, surprisingly hard, suckling on his tongue, while her fingers started sliding apart the buttons of his shirt. Evan thought his head would explode with the pleasure of it. "This is probably crazy. Do you think we're making a mistake?" Flora pulled back, panting. She was asking a question, but her hand was still moving. Her index finger traced the bump on his nose that Robert had given him playing rugby. It slipped across his lips, dipping into his mouth and out before he could capture it. "I like your face," she murmured honestly. Evan replied by flipping her over, making her gasp in shock. Still nestled between her legs, he pressed his full weight against her, bent his head, and growled in her ear. "Ah, Flora, too late, hen. Mistake or not, you're pure getting the booby the night." "What?" she shrieked. "Is that Scottish for nookie?" She was laughing and turned on at the same time. "What's the booby?" Evan responded by pressing it into the cleft of her thighs. "The booby, you know, the booby." He rocked his hips leisurely, enjoying the way her pyjamas aided the slip and slide. Evan ran the scruff of his beard along Flora's jaw, making her quiver underneath him. "Speaking dirty Scottish is kind of sexy. Do you mind if I wash your clothes tomorrow?" Flora dragged his mouth back to hers and kissed him hungrily, running her tongue along his teeth, her hands clamped around Evan's ears with a little too much exuberance. "What? Ow! Take it easy, Angel. You might pull those off if you're not careful." "Sorry," she said, giving them a little rub. "I'm a bit out of practice and a lot overexcited." Evan knelt up and undid the rest of his shirt buttons, allowing Flora to lean back and catch her breath. She smiled in satisfaction when he took the fabric off his arms and threw it on the table. Her hands came up and caressed the breadth of his shoulders, massaging him gently before drifting down to his pecs, which flinched at her touch. "I was terrified you'd have ginger chest hair," Flora sighed, sifting her fingers through his smattering of tawny fluff. "No, that's just charming. Do you insult all the men that you sleep with?" Evan pretended to be affronted. "I've not got ginger pubes either, in case you're wondering." He unsnapped the button on his jeans and turned his attention to her clothing. Flora's mouth dropped open in awe. All she could think was, "Oh my fucking God." "Wait, give me a minute, I'm still looking at you." Evan slumped back, breathing out hard to help him ease off a little. Fascinated, Flora stroked the firm ripples of his tummy with the backs of her hands. She ran them up his chest before turning them over and stroking his tight pink nipples with the pads of her fingers. He was such the opposite of everything she'd experienced. It was like touching someone in a dream. Even the confident smirk he was wearing didn't revolt her. Flora liked dark-haired men, and that's what she'd always chosen. In return, yes, she got dark hair, but somehow it also came with beer guts, man boobs, hairy backs, and manscaping issues. She looked at the hunk of loveliness sat on top of her, desire melting the chilly blue ice in his eyes, and all she could think of was the movie Highlander. Not the parts with swords and beheading, only that fluttery little phrase, "my beautiful man." Brushing off her stupidity, Flora told herself to get a grip and take what she could get. She pulled Evan's face to hers and he took her lips in a deep, wet kiss. He withdrew and then surged back, his tongue sliding along her own. It was erotic and commanding and like they'd done it 100 times before. Evan broke away and untied the knot of her robe. With much leaning and lifting, they extricated her from the sleeves and it pulled around her back. Flora felt like she was in danger of passing out, almost overcome by the sheer masculinity of him. Taut, veiny forearms framed her sides, and she felt tiny and feminine beneath him. His lips went to her throat as he undid the buttons of her pyjamas. The full glide of the flat of his tongue in the hollow of her throat was like heaven. Flora could hardly breathe, he felt so good against her skin, and oh heavens, he was so deliciously hard everywhere. He started doing this thing where he gave the tiniest kiss, followed by a press of his tongue that made her heart jolt like it was shocked by a defibrillator. As he peeled away the silk lapels of her top, he groaned when he realised she was braless. God, Flora, I couldn't have dreamed this any better. Taking her unawares, Evan pulled both of her arms above her head. He shifted about, trying unsuccessfully to grasp both of her wrists in one hand. "Stop it! What are you doing?" Flora struggled, causing both a sumptuous jiggle of her boobs and a simultaneous jolt to his cock. "Just let me do this," he complained. Lifting himself up, Evan grappled with her hands again. "Give up? You're not doing any of your weird DSM stuff to me. I want my arms free." Evan sighed and let go. "I'm pretty sure DSM is a school of motoring in Dundee. I think you mean BDSM. Whatever it is, it's not happening on my sofa." Evan grumbled under his breath. Some nonsense Flora didn't catch about not following the rules, but he seemed to quickly cheer up and resign himself to the task in front of him. Scooting down, he trailed kisses along Flora's collarbone, before lightly coasting parted lips down to one of her fabulous C-cups. Evan licked and circled her breast with his tongue. He laved at it again and again, then softly bit the underside, making Flora arch her back helplessly. He moved his mouth to her other breast and used one of his broad hands to sculpt and mould the one he'd already pleasured. Flora's fingers ruffled his hair the wrong way from the nape of his neck upwards, pulling the strands exquisitely tight. "You're full of surprises," he murmured. "And all the time I've been looking at you, I thought what a lovely face you had, and what a lovely bottom." He stopped what he was doing and squeezed it, pressing her into his erection. She hummed mindlessly. "I must have been slipping, because somehow it escaped me what lovely big boobs you had." Flora's eyes shot open. Evan glanced up, grinning cheekily at her. He met and caught her eyes as he trailed a finger to the waistband of her bottoms and pulled them down. Flaming hell, no knickers either. Leaning back once more, he pulled Flora up tighter against his hips. He lifted her legs to brace them against his shoulders, and her instep stroked the side of his face languidly. "You're really good at this. Seduction, I mean." "I am when someone's not telling me what to do all the time," Evan complained. Pulling her trousers with both hands, he slid them under her bottom and all the way up the length of her legs. They brushed over his face as they came off, and he slung them casually over his shoulder. Taking her ankles in both hands, he placed a kiss on each one, circling his tongue slowly around her ankle bone and suckling the hollows. Flora squirmed and covered her upper body with her arms. While Evan was making sexy time with her feet, he was also zapping her with relentless eye contact, which was making her feel a little exposed. She quite liked her own body, but she knew lots of men found her too plump. At least laid down like this, her tummy looked almost flat. Keen to move things along, Flora pushed the sole of her right foot against Evan's hard chest. She pressed just enough so she could reach forward and unzip him. Before he could stop what she was doing, Flora had her hand inside his boxer briefs and a firm grip on his penis, stroking him frantically. "Steady, love! Flora, steady on!" he yelped. "What's the hurry? I'm not after coming in my drawers. Lie back, I'm going to go down on you first." No, she dismissed the idea casually. "Don't bother, I'm ready to get on with it. Please just hurry up, Evan." "Don't bother?" He was horrified. "What kind of men have you been with?" Pushing forward, he locked his arms and pressed her back into the couch. Flora's legs were still over his shoulders, bending her in two. Softly, he kissed the outer corners of her mouth and touched the tip of his tongue to each dimple, sampling the skin of her jaw with his teeth and lips. Flora's breathing deepened, and between their bodies Evan could feel her hand reaching for him again. He caught it with his own and looked startled for a second. "You've got calluses on your fingers." She stiffened, finding that quite offensive. "I'm sorry if it bothers you, but I have to work for a living. My hands are tools. I do my best to take care of them, but unless my career radically changes, then I'm stuck with a bit of hard skin. That's what happens when you use scissors and blades and have your hands in soap all day." "I'm not complaining," he defended. "I'm a little dismayed. I'm supposed to have the calluses." "Why? Because you're a man?" As if to prove her point, she slid her hand back around the evidence and gave him one long crank with a twist. "It's a prerequisite," Evan groaned. "Believe me, Evan, your hands feel just fine without." "So how big are we talking about here?" Flora traced the underside of his erection with her knuckles. "You know," she said, "I think we might need to get the ruler out. I think it's getting bigger and thicker all the time." Evan moaned from deep in his chest. Flora's hands moved and cupped his balls. She used some kind of slow juggling motion and pressed insistently with the slightly rough pad of her thumb. It seemed calluses felt great for men too. "Christ, that's good." She tugged on his length, pulling it towards where she lay wet and open. As his tip touched her, Evan hissed in pleasure. "Time for you to get that condom out of your back pocket," she whispered in his ear. "How did you know?" "Because, Evan—" Shit, she squawked. "I was about to use your full name and realised I don't even know it. Oh my God, that's disgraceful." Hush, sweetheart. I don't know yours either, and I'm not complaining. He dipped a hand into his back pocket and slid out the condom, ripping the cover with his teeth. Flora flinched as she felt his hand slip between them. The inadvertent touches as he covered himself in tight quarters made her want to hop right out of her skin. Taking himself in hand, Evan guided his length to her entrance. She was slick and welcoming and had needed so little foreplay. Flora felt overwhelmed by the first glancing touch. He was big and hard and much more than she was used to. Evan pushed inexorably in with one slow thrust. Heavens, that feels so nice, Flora sighed with every fibre of her body. She'd never had it this good, and he'd hardly even moved yet. Evan moved a hand up to her jaw and caressed her cheek. She averted her eyes because for a split second it felt dangerously tender. The way he looked at her implied more than a casual fumble on the sofa, but he was probably very talented at making women feel wanted. To Flora, this felt like genuine intimacy, and the idea of it being one-sided was verging on painful. Evan broke the spell right before panic might have begun to set in. Hello, Flora, don't know what your last name is. I'm Evan McElroy. It's very nice of you to invite me in. Hot, clean breath accompanied his words, teasing her ear. His dirty, wicked tone was exactly how she'd imagined it to be. No, Evan's sex voice did not disappoint at all. Hello, Mr. McElroy, she grinned back. I'm Flora Marston. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm so glad that you could come. Ha! Not yet, sweetheart. Evan's hand left her jaw and went to her hip, lifting her up and into him as he thrust. He kept his other arm locked and his knees bent, so Flora could feel every carefully measured inch of him. Even though his torso wasn't close, the sensation of domination was all-consuming. It was so much more than all the sweaty boys who'd humped away at her, suffocating her nose in their armpits. The experience was something she'd want to repeat, and it scared Flora because she wouldn't get to keep it. He would leave, and she would be no good for anybody else. She had to do something to break the dangerous connection that was forming. You're not fooling me, you know. What's that, love? Evan groaned and ducked his head to suck long and hard on one juicy pink nipple, grinding his hips into her. Homeless people don't look like you. Everything about you. God, yes, more right there. You're toned and well-nourished, but you know what? I'm not questioning it. I've had a weird day. I'm a little stressed, and I want to have sex anyway. She groaned as Evan's weight slipped and he plunged deeper than expected. Evan righted himself and pulled out for a moment, guilt sucking at his insides. Flora opened her mouth to complain bitterly, but he lifted her easily, silencing her complaint by turning her onto her hands and knees. Oh my God, I've never done it this way before. Her voice was high and breathless, giddy and sexy all at the same time. Her glee made Evan smile, and he mounted her again with a high, hard thrust. Guilt and pleasure flooded his brain in equal measure, as he gloried in the view of Flora's biteable, curvy bottom. She was always 100% truth, and he couldn't look at her and lie, but neither could he stop taking what he wanted. Evan felt a possessiveness that was new, and ran his hand along one pink fleshy cheek, squeezing and relaxing over and over. It was fucking ridiculous. His drivelling brain had read too many trite romance novels, because that tiny word, mine, kept playing over and over in his head. The bloody thing was stuck on a loop with every thrust. It was annoyingly distracting and as cliched as hell. To divert his thoughts, and because it was impossible to resist, he gave Flora a brief, satisfying smack on her rear. Oh, bloody hell, you rotten bugger. Then she laughed, and he was enchanted. Grumpy that he was enjoying it too much, and using the last of his restraint, he growled in her ear, The next time around, this is going down differently. Flora felt his gorgeous chest over her, the heat of him inside her. He was so full and thick. Evan's hands went for the payoff, one to her mound to stroke a finger against her clit, and the other to tease and caress her breasts. Sucking on her earlobe, he thrust shallowly, his rhythm prompting her to rotate her hips, trying to draw him back in. Listen carefully while I explain. Evan pushed Flora's shoulders down and used his weight to pin her there. The next time I fuck you, there's not going to be a conversation about it. I'm going to tie you up, down, and all around if I feel like it. And if you still won't stop giving me cheek, then I'll have to gag you. Maybe one of those dog collars if you're very stubborn. Now are you ready? Flora tossed her head back in ecstasy, nearly giving him a black eye in the process. Yes. Yes, please. Say my name, he demanded. Pardon? Evan was getting annoyed. It was bloody hard work remembering all this malarkey. How long would he have to keep Flora on the brink of climax to get her to spout something from his list of sex scene sundries? Would she beg? Would she talk dirty back to him? Would she demand 20 quid for the inconvenience? He shook his head at his arrogance. He really ought to maintain some semblance of realism. It was too late anyway. His control was fast diminishing, and he was about to lose his reputation for staying power. Too bad he really couldn't give a shit. Evan, please, pretty please. Faster, more Bobby, please. Shit, I knew I'd love hearing you beg for it. Then the talking part was over. Flora gripped the arm of the settee as Evan fucked her fast and hard. She gasped as he felt contractions pulse around him. Both hands went to her hips as Evan held on for dear life. Digging underneath and up, he pressed deep and held Flora tight to him as he spurted heavily in a succession of mind-bending convulsions. Flora, meanwhile, had arrived in another time zone. She had so been missing out on the good stuff. Freya must have been having sex like this for 7 years. She'd always gone on and on about Ollie's sexual prowess, and Flora had moaned, yeah, and refused to believe it. Sex was just sex, right? Wrong. Sex just got awesome. For a sublime few seconds, Evan lay draped over Flora's back. He was hot and sweaty, and the feel of his muscular arms wrapped around her was pure bliss. He withdrew slowly, causing Flora to clench and shudder. Then there was the sudden sensation of wetness. Fuck. What? What's wrong? Nothing. Just, well, Flora, are you on anything? What? I don't take drugs. For fuck's sake, are you on the pill? No, never. What's the matter? The condoms burst. What? Flora flipped around and caught the sight of Evan balefully glaring at the abused latex in his hand, frantically tucking himself away. Shit! He flung the condom in the wastepaper basket in disgust. You can't put it in there. One of the dogs will get it back out later. Christ, Evan said again, as if that made a blind bit of difference. You can go to the doctor in the morning. They'll have the whatchamacallit. He waggled a hand at her as if that explained everything. And you can bugger right off. I've not even registered with them yet, and there's not a chance in hell I'm asking for the morning after pill on my very first visit. You'll have to go into Newmarket and buy it for me. Oh no, I'm pretty sure they'll want to ask you some questions I don't need to know the answers to. You can hardly buy paracetamol these days without the 3rd degree. Never mind what you need. I'll pay for it, Flora, but I'm not asking for it. Evan grasped the bin and took it towards the kitchen. There was a crash as his foot snagged the baby gate, and he bellowed as he landed elbow first on the kitchen floor. All the dogs started barking at the commotion. Flora put her head in her hands. Okay, that was fun for a few minutes, but now she'd had unprotected sex, and with a homeless man of all things. Bloody beer making her all horny. Have you got any diseases? Are you clean? Flora wailed, grabbing her dressing gown and running towards the kitchen. I am now, he groaned. Evan lay, trapped on the floor, with his foot caught in the baby gate. Flora gaped, looking at the spot where it hung drunkenly from the wall, a loose screw and a chunk of plaster attached. Riley stood possessively on Evan's chest, and he'd given up trying to deter the 7 delighted canines currently licking his face and neck. Given the odds of triumph when facing such doggy affection, a man just had to accept when he was beaten.